And we're back with Homer Bound. There's the words. A podcast where a couple nerds read through and discuss Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. We don't do retakes here. We just roll with what we've produced. I'm Wriste.
I'm Llama. I'm trying
yes,
as
Llama.
hard as I can to contain my laughter on
Listen,
that one.
Podcasting is an audio medium. You know, people can't see, like, I can see you covering your mouth and trying not to laugh, but you know, the people at home need laughter too. So
That's why I'm telling them. I'm trying to restrain my laughter right now.
you can save yourself the trouble by just, laughing. I'm funny, right?
You would like to think that, wouldn't you?
I would. It's true.
You can be sometimes.
Occasionally. It depends on my mood. I guess, how would I describe my mood now? I'm still wallowing a little bit in all of the knowledge that we got from last episode. That was such a clarifying hour that we got from Dr. Kara Jones.
Yeah. She's a fantastic guest. She blew my mind absolutely in terms of the Shield of Achilles. I'm with you in the kind of like what stage of realization.
Yeah, like I can't stop imagining Achilles just carrying this super detailed, super layered painting on his arm. Yeah, I guess it's like more like engravements or engravings or sculpture or something like that. Some combination thereof.
I still like the kind of image that I had of it as almost like a tapestry woven in metal.
I think that's solid as well. I'll adjust really quickly one thing that I said in the last episode, which is I guess I can't really say that Achilles is carrying his choice on his sleeve, or on his arm rather, which is still like a really cool image. But it's more just he carries like the possibilities, or not his choice, but his choices. And I can't help but think about how so much of the Shield is, as we talked about, just a bunch of everyday Greek life. And there's just one portion that's war, and that's where he happens to find himself.
Yeah, if you think about it, he's carrying the potential of the entirety of life, or the potential for this one very specific part of life, which is war. And he chooses war.
Getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, there's a part where Achilles' shield gets pierced, and it actually kind of hurts now, because I can now visualize what's on it, and the idea of it being damaged is a little sad.
Yeah, it's just a downer.
But yeah, past that, I guess that can serve as our recap of, the highlight was absolutely learning about Achilles, his new armor, and specifically his new shield. Achilles is kind of ready to go. How does it feel to be on the other? Like, I feel like we're finally on the other end of a long, tiring journey.
Yeah. It's
not.
I mean, I don't know. It's interesting because like this is the part of the book where everything is most ramped up. So like from like 16 on has just been so exhilarating that I'm really looking forward to the end of like getting through the rest of the books that are left, because they're so good.
Yeah, we only have a couple episodes left after this one.
Yeah.
I'm thinking like whenever I make it through that, from book 8 onward, it's either war or war adjacent, and tons of fighting, and everyone's there. And now that we're here, it's pretty much just going to be Achilles. Like, that's it. You sort of zoom, feel like we've gotten like a nice wide shot of the war for 8+ books, and now we're zooming in and focusing really closely on one particular thing.
It does kind of narrow in on, the most epic part of the story in these last few books.
Yeah, there's, as I said, it's going to be basically just Achilles. I guess it's a good part to lay our content warning. sometimes we swear. We're going to talk about violence and all that stuff. We've mentioned hugging and kissing before, but
most of that is out of the way for this poem.
Well, all of it's out of the way for the Iliad. There'll be some discussion of it in the Odyssey, which will happen in just a couple episodes. Feels weird that we're this close to being done.
I think the fun is just beginning, because the Odyssey is also going to be quite interesting. But being almost done with the Iliad, though, is kind of nuts.
What's it like? Since you've said this is, I guess, your second, third-ish time reading through it, how's the experience, I guess, reading through it this third time as opposed to having just read it by yourself that first one or two times?
Well, it's really fun because, like, getting to talk with you for this has opened up a lot of things for me as I read it that I don't think I might have picked up. So, like, having someone who has read it considerably more than I have to point out things that interest you has made me look into things in ways that I didn't before. Or even just, like, like if you're watching a movie with a friend who's really into that movie and they're able to
shut up about it.
And they won't shut up about it, but they also end up pointing out the really cool shit about that movie.
Mm-hmm.
And you get to, like, learn about it, as you watch it. It's almost kind of like that, but not in an annoying way. It could be that, and you annoy me frequently.
Did you just say I'm not annoying you?
I said I followed it up with you annoy me.
It's on camera.
I followed that up with you annoy me frequently. Stop gloating about something that I literally negated the second after. But, like, yeah, it's been a fun experience. I definitely, like, have a much better appreciation of this as an adult than I did, as a teenager reading it in high school. So, like, that
we can all say that.
That has also helped considerably.
Like, I know we're supposed to read when we're younger, but some minds are, and I think there are many, some minds of a certain age are just not ready for things like the Iliad or Moby Dick or whatever. I know you love Moby Dick, which is why I brought it up.
People, I do not care for Moby Dick.
He doesn't like Moby Dick.
I don't like the book. I don't, like, hate you if you like it, but I did not care for Moby Dick.
It was sort of what reminded me what reading was all about, sort of. I remember when I was like 14, my parents said, okay, if you read Moby Dick, we'll buy you this like $30 toy. It was like it was a transformer or something. And I read it. I thumbed through it. We also had an abridged version in our bookshelf, which I could sort of use as a guide, but I didn't know what was going on. But when I just picked it up and I was able to engage with it because I wanted to, I was able to, get a fresh perspective. And I think the Iliad is the same way times a dozen.
I'm not sure I'd still choose Moby Dick for that.
It's the one that sticks out for me in my mind.
That was kind of what Jane Eyre was like for me, actually. I read Jane Eyre in high school and didn't like it or get it at all. And then I read it again in college and absolutely, like, it clicked. It just clicked.
Did you read it because you had to, or did you read it because you just...
In high school because I had to, and in college because I was curious.
Yeah.
Like, if it would be any better now that I was a few years older. So.
I think that's just the best way to approach any kind of media, is to approach it curiously and not out of obligation.
And that's why, like, poems, books like the Iliad, like, have so much value in rereading them and letting,
absolutely.
This is something that goes back to me. Okay, I started doing this. This is a Lord of the Rings thing, people. You better be ready for it.
Go for it. Do it.
I've been rereading The Lord of the Rings almost once a year since the extended edition of the movies came out. And
That's a long time ago.
There's part of the documentary where Christopher Lee, who plays Saruman, mentioned that he reread the books every year. And I was like, that would be interesting. They change. Like, when you reread books like that, they change. And for me, this is a similar experience. Like, this book changes.
You get something different out of it every time.
Exactly. It changes every time you read it.
Well, it's not the one that's changing, right? It's you who's changing.
Well, absolutely. But there's so many... But it does change, too, because, like, also interpretation has changed it throughout time, and different
Yeah.
interpretations of it. And we've talked about this so many times, like different interpretations of this exist in so many ways. As we have been, chit-chatting a tiny bit about the Odyssey just a moment ago, I was thinking to myself how different Emily Wilson's translation is, just in flow and style. And it's really cool because
which you'll know more about than I do,
yeah,
because I've only read it like once or twice.
I think we're probably going to be somewhat on the same level still, because I've read it maybe this is a third time. So, like, I'm not sure that I've read it that much more than you have, but I really love the story, and I remember it a lot better than I remembered anything from the Iliad. So, we'll see.
I guess one last thing, and this will be relevant to our talk on book 19. I'm curious, especially since we're not at the end. I don't want to toot the horn just yet, but what is, if there is one, the most interesting or unexpected thing that you got out of this particular reading of the Iliad for you?
Well, I mean, I think part of it might be the last episode that we had with Dr. Kira Jones.
Yeah,
because
sure. That's kind of an easy
honestly,
one.
I think that is the thing that has like blown my mind most. It's also
anything like more holistic, I guess.
I might have to get back to you on that, honestly. Like, that is a question that I'd actually really love to think about more fully.
Yeah, we'll put a tack in it.
But I think that's a great question. I love that question.
Well, for me, and I guess this isn't. No, this is kind of a change. And I've been very hard on Achilles over the course of these discussions, and I've talked about why, so I won't repeat it too heavily. But one thing that I've held firmly in my mind, which I hadn't done in any other reading, is that Achilles is like absolutely directly responsible for, as the proem stated, these countless losses for the Achaeans. And that has colored my reading and view of Achilles that in a way that I guess I sort of anticipated, but, reading through the words again with that in mind, in book 19, and I guess in book 18 as well, we get a lot of the tragic aftermath of Patroclus' death from more than one character, from more than Achilles, but the main focus is usually Achilles. But knowing that this isn't just sort of accidentally Achilles doing, this is very much on purpose, especially since he knew that, or I think he had reason to suspect that Patroclus would die when he sent him out. Maybe he was trying to cheat fate by telling him to come back, which unfortunately he did not. But also the fact that he has all of these men's blood on his hands, it really does change the way I view him. I find it more difficult to connect with him. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, that makes some sense to me. I don't know. I think I have always held both Achilles and Agamemnon like really both quite responsible for everything. As I've maintained throughout it, I think they both kind of suck. So I think I maybe got there a little sooner. I never really gave either of them that much credit because, you are made to want to like Achilles. He's not that great a guy. And neither is Agamemnon. And they both bother me.
I guess in terms of, like, in the Iliad specifically, I rank Achilles kind of the lowest in terms of moral character. Just due to the sheer gross disregard of the lives of his countrymen. At least Agamemnon kind of cares about them.
I would have to sit down and like really make a tier list for that. I wanna
Most despicable characters.
I would love to tier list the, the characters of the Iliad. That could be super fun. But
for me, Achilles would be S tier.
Well, wait, how are you defining S tier?
If S is the worst of character.
Okay, so that's not. I would say S tier is like the goodies, and then D and below are the baddies.
Okay, well then Achilles gets F tier on that scale.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
And there's one moment in this that struck me. These are very small books, so I think it's okay if we just hop around between them. Let's see, where is this? Yeah, so this is a little after line 320. This stood out to me, and this is why I bring up specifically reading the Iliad with Achilles' actions in mind. When Achilles says, "But Zeus somehow was bent on this awesome slaughter of Achaeans." Like, I don't know how to read that. Is Achilles like sincerely unsure? The word somehow. I don't know what this looks like in the Greek, but it's like, oh, this happened some way. I you know. But of course, we know who it is. We know why Zeus was bent on this awesome slaughter of Achaeans, and he's talking to those very people.
That's a really, really interesting line to point out. Somehow was bent on this awesome slaughter. And it's like somehow, just somehow.
Some way. It's unexplainable. What's weird is, like, if this were a modern day, like, Hannibal is such a good example, right? Like, if anyone hasn't watched the first 2 seasons of the television show Hannibal, I recommend you find it and watch it. It's incredible. But one of the cool things about it is that, I mean, spoiler alert, Hannibal is a cannibal serial killer, and he's working with the FBI. And the FBI, of course, does not know that he is this. But we know, we the viewers know. And so we kind of have an analog for that in book 1. We know that Achilles has made this wish, this deal with Zeus. Yeah. But unlike in a modern story, people he's done this to never learn it. At least not that I can see. He never tells anyone. And of course, I don't know why he would. But no one's like, oh, Achilles is the reason why we've been losing this whole time. He was the cannibal all along.
Oh my god, that just blew my mind a little bit, honestly.
And yeah, I don't know. This is why.
I'm not sure that I've ever thought about it that way.
Oh, this is why I would put him at F tier, because of stuff like this, where it's so total and it's so tangible. It's more than just his disposition. It's very much simply the results of his actions and what he's very directly asked for.
Well, if it isn't the consequences of my own actions.
Yeah, and even even in the previous book, there was I think I mentioned this in the last episode. In the previous book, there was a part where Achilles is talking about, oh, yeah, Patroclus is dead. Hector's killed him. I think I've asked you if you've seen the television show You before, and you said you haven't.
That's correct.
I also recommend it, but it's about a stalker, and the stalker who is stalking his girlfriend, it's complicated, but he's looking in her computer, and he finds something, and it's evidence that someone, not him, is, like, following her around, and he closes it, and his inner monologue is like, oh my god, you have a stalker. Just completely unironic. There's no joke. Like, it's funny. It's very funny to hear, but it's delivered with such sincerity, and that's what I hear when Achilles is like, oh, Hector's killed him. The Trojans have beaten down Patroclus, which again is why I have difficulty connecting with his. I don't know. Like, maybe you have a different feeling about it. I guess how do you read his grief?
I mean, I just think it's.
You grieve with him?
I wouldn't say that necessarily. I mean, like, we're kind of forced to, right? The poet is very sympathetic towards Achilles and his grief. At least I feel like.
What do you mean by sympathetic?
Well, I'm not sympathetic in the sense of, like, an actual sense of sympathy, but just the general tone of Achilles' grief about Patroclus, I think, is very positive in terms of the way it describes Achilles. But I believe
his grief is genuine.
I believe it's very genuine, but I also think that it is a result of his own actions, and there's reason to be judgmental of it.
I don't even know about judgmental. I guess I'm still not sure how to feel about it. I'm not sure how to feel toward Achilles for his grief. Like, intellectually, I know that he's sad, and I know that it's a genuine sadness. but I don't know what to do with that knowledge.
Yeah.
Like, should I feel sad with him? Should I feel sad for him?
And obviously, like, this is, a work of fiction, so,
sure.
like, there's part of me that, like, reads it, and every time I'm just like, so you basically just, like, told him to go out there and promise not to die, and then when he died, you're, like, all broken up about it. Like, no one can touch your grief, you refuse to eat, you refuse to do anything. Like, I don't know. It's like a teenager's fit.
Well, yeah, he is young.
Which
as
is not too far off, but like it's hard to reconcile with what you've been told about him the entire time. I think sometimes
it's a really good way of putting it.
Like,
I'm conflicted. I don't know
like you get a lot more conflicted by like whether or not you can actually sympathize with him, and I have a hard time doing it because like he's just like, oh, yeah, I told him not to die. Like, I told him to come back and not go die, and he couldn't.
I feel like if I really feel bad for Achilles, I mean, again, this is fiction, but in the mechanisms of my disbelief suspending heart, I have to forgive him if I'm to really feel bad for him, if I'm to share in his grief,
Sure. And like, that's fine. Like, forgiveness is achievable because in the grand scheme of things, what he's going through is actually kind of really human. Like, you may be giving your friend some really crappy advice and not expecting it to go wrong because things rarely, if ever, go wrong for you. And then, like, to have it backfire in the worst possible way with that person dying.
Yeah, like,
it's
like telling your friend to drive slowly if they're like kind of tipsy and telling them if you do that, you'll be fine. And then they get in a car crash or something. And it's like, oh no.
I think that's actually probably a decent example. There's just so many ways that I can think. It's like that happening to people, whether in, real life or depictions of movies. Like, it's a very common thing to happen. It's very human.
Speaking of very human, I think we've talked extensively about how human Agamemnon is. And at one point I mentioned that he is sort of on the cusp of like I regret everything sort of thing in that fateful moment when you're trying to carry all the Starbucks cups in one hand and they all fall over. You're like, oh no, I wish I'd done everything differently. And if I'm to give Agamemnon that, I would say that I can see that in Achilles as well, right? He never says it aloud. He's never like, oh, if only I didn't do this. At least not that I remember. But I can only imagine that weighs on him in a very much, I wish I could take everything back and do it over again or something.
I think this is one thing to do in real life when you can kind of just get a feeling about a certain type of person. And amazingly enough, like when I read this, I managed to get that sense through the text because like, it's just when you get a feeling about like the type of person or like the type of thoughts, when you can like just read like panic and or regret on someone's face, they somehow manage to do that sometimes in the Iliad. Like, I think there are times where you can just read like the regret in certain people. Like, you can do it with Helen, you can do it with Agamemnon at times. And then there's, also moments like right before certain people are about to die where they'll just be like, oh no. Like, oh, this is not going as well as I thought at all. And you can read and like feel their panic like come off of the words on the page. I think I feel that way sometimes with Achilles' grief. I feel that times with, Agamemnon's like sense of like regret,
his unsureness, his insecurities. I think that's a good way of putting it. We've been doing that.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
we've done that like when we talk about how they fight, right? We've talked about how Agamemnon's fighting, he feels very angry, while Idomeneus' fight feels very joyful.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, sometimes you just are able to lift stuff like that from the words on the page. Sometimes not. Sometimes it's really difficult.
No, no, I guess that's one of the beauties of writing, because I don't think I could. I mean, maybe if I really tried, I could probably sit down and like pull like individual lines or sentences or stanzas and say, this is where the anger is. This is where the joy is, or whatever, or the sadness or the regret. But like taken holistically, I don't think we really need to, unless we're writing some 50-page long paper or something.
I endeavor to do that in my life, which seems like a mistake, but
to write a 50-page long paper just on anything?
Probably considerably more than that if I go for a book at some point in my life, but
oh,
you know,
I'll have to ask you about that after the podcast. A book? Keep an eye out, everyone, for
academia. It's called academia.
Yeah, sure, fair enough. Reading through book 19, it felt like a mini reprisal of book 1. Did you get that feeling?
Yeah, at times a little bit.
If anything, just because we have Agamemnon and Achilles back together again at last.
They're back.
They're back.
They're both really happy about it. Things are going well.
Well, obviously things aren't going super well. Achilles is finally back out of hiding, and Agamemnon can finally give Achilles the stuff that he promised him. It's kind of funny. You'll hear me on, since you've talked about ritual and how that sort of stuff is very interesting to you. And this whole book is like a tug of war for and against, I guess, observing these rituals. Because Agamemnon, he still wants to talk and have, diplomacy and stuff like that. He still, I think, views Achilles as royalty of some kind. He's a prince. He leads the Myrmidons. And Achilles is just having... It's not that he's having none of it in the same way that he did in book 1, but he's just not interested.
He's not interested at all.
He
just wants to fight. All he wants to do right now is fight.
Yeah, and all Agamemnon... I mean, obviously he wants Achilles to fight too. But before he does that, he wants to observe these things that make people people.
The way that I see it, it's kind of Agamemnon trying to be like, all right, but like, you say we're good before we do the fighting. Can we say that like you and I were good? He's trying to reach that point where he's like, have I fixed this enough that like you are now firmly back on my side again? And like, or are you just angry and you're just gonna go stomping out there like no matter what?
I think Agamemnon views Achilles coming back as transactional.
Absolutely.
Right? Like you're here for this, and I'm here, and I'm going to give you that, and we'll be square. But Achilles doesn't see it that way.
Yeah, Achilles is just like,
He's not doing this for Agamemnon.
Like I never wanted it to be this way in the first place. Now you're continuing to try and make it this way. Like, fine, we'll end up doing it your way, but like later.
The biggest ritual, and I think we've talked about like even eating as like a kind of ritual, or as like Achilles has no interest in eating food either. He's completely disregarded not only his eating, but the eating of everyone else.
So this is the part that I told you. This is the part that I told you. I was going to make a joke about it. Yep, that's right. It's not actually really a joke. It's just my margin. It's my margin note. There's a line around 254 or 5. You talk of food. I have no taste for food. What I really crave is slaughter and blood and the choking groans of men. And next to that, I just wrote, I'm here to chew gum and kill people. And Patty had the gum.
See, when he says that, I'm just thinking, he's got his earbuds in and he's just blasting Linkin Park.
Absolutely.
And everyone can hear it
yes.
in like super low quality.
Right. And he's singing along like slightly off key, way too loud, the way that people with headphones on do.
He thinks he sounds good because
he thinks he
he's
sounds
lining
amazing.
Up with Chester.
It's great. I really do sometimes see Achilles like as a kind of emo kid though. Like he strikes me as the type of person who would listen to like emo music and grunge.
Well, he is moody. You know what? I have been kicking around in my mind, what modern day scenario would best bring out the characteristics of all these characters. Because we're reading these characters in a context that none of us are familiar with. This is 3,000 years ago, ancient Greece. We don't know what these customs are, but if you put them in like a band or something, then you can get a clearer view of what they're like, right? Like Achilles would be screaming into a microphone or something.
Yeah.
Crunching away on his guitar.
Achilles, I think, listens to like System of a Down.
Does Achilles? I guess I suspect he listens to System of a Down, but he doesn't actually know what the words mean.
Definitely not.
He just likes the sound.
And I don't know, who is Agamemnon's favorite band? Metallica?
No, I don't know. Fuck, we're getting deep into the
deeply
weeds
sidetracked.
here.
It's great.
I don't know. I feel like Agamemnon sometimes listens to like, I feel like Agamemnon sometimes listens to like soothing sort of solo string guitar, and sometimes he listens to like death metal.
Sure. I kind of see him as a ZZ Top guy. Like like you're like, I don't know, you're like older uncle who's really into like old but like really generic classic rock.
I guess so. I don't know. As you said, Agamemnon has he has these swings, and I'm trying to figure out. I don't know. I feel like he'd listen to something. I feel like he'd listen to something that makes him cry, but he only does it in the privacy of his tent. He doesn't do it in front of anyone else. He tells other people that he likes, ZZ Top or Metallica or whatever, but when he's inside, he's listening to those like sad songs that solo artists write that are always about like home or something like that.
Like Paul Simon.
Anyway, that's how I
I think that, no, I really like that. I like that a lot.
Anyway, that's been what musical instrument is your favorite Greek hero? We'll never bring this segment back again.
I liked it.
Another person we'll never bring back again is Briseis, who gets her only speaking line in the entire story.
That was a beautiful segue.
Thank you. That's why they pay me the big bucks.
Do they?
Nope.
Yeah. This always catches me off guard.
Mm-hmm.
Like this appearance, and you're just like, oh. And then she gets all sad about Patroclus, which is like interesting to me. I don't think it ever really establishes like what a relationship she actually has with him and or Achilles.
Yeah, but we get a little bit of background, and the last couple words of her speech kind of do hit me. She says, "You were always kind." Like that's
a heartbreaker.
That's such a regular thing to say. Like it's very simple. There's no grandiosity about it. It's just there. That's what I would say to someone.
It's really touching. It's like actually really touching and sweet. Kind of makes you happy to see her. That, like, I don't know. I really like seeing her in this just because I think it's nice to have like any female voice as commentary at this point in the book that is so male dominated.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously the entire poem is, but like it's interesting to see it. And when the women in the Iliad pop up, whether it's in the form of the goddesses or Helen or Andromache, other women who are like,
mm-hmm.
it always kind of calls me to attention.
Yeah.
And so I was glad to see Briseis like actually being able to talk.
I mean, it's sad. It's not just sad for me because she's sad, which it is. She is. But there's also a more big picture reason. Like if he's taken care of her or looked out for her or something, and he was the thing that gave her some hope, perhaps. She's expressed losing her entire family, and now the one person who tried to give her anything good past that is gone. Then that kind of spells it makes your future look kind of bleak, I think. And so she's mourning Patroclus, but she's also kind of mourning her future.
Oh, yeah.
Just a little bit, I think.
Absolutely. Mourning a sense of like safety and protection that she had, and mourning that, I mean, like, I don't know, in that situation, that he was a kind person actually really matters a lot. Like, having a kind person actually looking out after your fortunes as a woman in this era must have been something, at least maybe somewhat unusual, you know? So, like,
especially if you're a slave. That's,
absolutely.
Like, doubly important. And
like,
yeah,
you are robbed of all of your agency and robbed of all of your choices, really.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
And yeah, the I think it's also very critical to point out that, you know, Patroclus was, you know, we know from the poet and we know from other people's accounts that Patroclus was gentle and kind. We don't really see much of that in like other people, and so this is kind of, you know, we're also I want to avoid, by Dr. Daniel's warning, I want to avoid deifying or what would the word be? Is angelification a word? Angelifying Patroclus?
Angelicizing?
Maybe, I don't know.
I don't know.
Making him out to be perfect when
sanctifying, you know, would be what I would go with.
Sure, maybe. I want to avoid forgetting that Patroclus was still at the end of the day a person, and he was also a person in this environment, and so it would be quite the remarkable individual to be totally uncorrupted by it, and we saw a little glimpse of how perhaps he wasn't. But that being said, you know, we've lost a sort of one-of-a-kind person
You've lost the mensch of the group. Like, he's the mensch of the group. He's the good guy. The mensch. A mensch is like a Yiddish word for like just someone who's just like a good guy, like trademark good guy, good person, you know?
Gotcha.
And that's what Patroclus is. Like, he's the mensch of the bunch. The mensch is still human, you know, you're still...
Yeah. I think that's a good way of looking at it. All around good dude. And now he's dead.
Yeah.
Sucks. It should be noted also that, you know, Thetis did work to preserve Patroclus's body. Don't know what that means for his spirit. I remember one of Dr. Daniel's tags, he was talking about how important it is to bury the bodies of soldiers, and how, very notably, Achilles is not burying Patroclus. Patroclus's spirit is still sort of drifting around and wandering. But at least his body is being preserved.
I feel like that almost kind of implies that, like, that preservation of the body by God, like, makes it, I don't know, easier or something to, like, transition into the world of death.
I wonder if the state of the body has any effect on that. Who knows?
You know,
one person
that,
knows.
like,
I'm not going to bring him up, but...
And you just did it. You've done it. I've done it.
Don't know what you're talking about.
We've done this so many times.
I guess the last thing, unless there's something else, I guess I'll throw it to you before I bring it up. Actually, was there anything else that caught your interest or stood out to you?
There is one little thing. I like the little dance that Achilles does, or not like a little dance, but the little like spin around that he does after he puts his gear on.
Yeah, he spins on his heels.
He puts all of this like new armor made brilliantly by a god, and he puts it on, and he's just like, let me have a little spin in this, to make sure it's, you know, like how it moves. I need to see how it moves. I just love that. That was a little like moment that stuck out to me. And then, you know, it that also goes into him lifting up this spear of his father's. And I loved the image of that.
I think I might have brought this up before. We'll certainly bring it up again in the Odyssey. But both of our, I guess for lack of a better word, heroes, have weapons that only they can wield, which I find to be weird. Achilles, his spear is heavy. And it says that only he has the skill to wield it well. Although I feel as though Ajax could probably lift it just fine. I suspect that unless it's just made of lead. But Odysseus has the same sort of deal. He has a bow that only he can string and draw.
It's a theme. It's an interesting theme within the two works. The untouchable weapon.
Yeah, maybe we'll get to dig into that a little bit more. But this is Achilles' weapon, his Pelion Ash spear. And finally, I guess before we close out, this early on in the series, I said there's only one time when a horse talks, and this is that part.
Y'all, there's a talking horse.
Yes, roan beauty is what it is translated as. I don't know what the original Greek is. I don't know where roan beauty comes from or what it means, but that's the name of the horse. Achilles is gearing up, and Hera just gives it the ability to basically remind him that, yeah, we're fast, but we can't get you out of your fate. Sorry.
The horse comes out of nowhere, is given a voice by a god, and uses that voice to tell Achilles that he's gonna die.
Yeah. But what's weirder than the horse talking is that Achilles is just like, he doesn't
react to that at all. Like, why is this horse talking?
He's like, why are you talking about that? Shut up. You don't know anything about this.
Let's go. Yeah, it is hysterically funny to just drop that in at the end of the book.
It feels almost out of place. Like we haven't seen any other talking animals in the Iliad. Why is his animal talking to him now?
Why is it prophesying his death? But I mean, why did Hera choose a horse?
Why did Hera do it at all? Maybe who knows? Maybe we'll find our answers later. This is this is one of those images that I can't really make heads or tails of. If I wanted to just take it as it is, this is the poem reiterating Achilles' conviction. He knows that he's going to die. He said this to his mother earlier in the book, and he's reiterating it to his horse now. He's ready to die, but he's also ready to kill. And he's made that trade in his heart. And that's where book 19 ends.
It sure is.
A talking horse.
A talking horse. We'll be back soon.
Yeah, we'll be back. We'll take a quick break. It's on to book 20. Stick around.
Hello, dear listener, and thanks for sticking with us through our little break. We'll be back in just a couple minutes, but I'd like to take a moment during the break to thank a few people and give a little information about the podcast. First, thank you for listening. This podcast has no sponsor. We've produced everything in-house and on our own time, and if you all are enjoying the fruits of our labor, that is the best thanks we can imagine. You can follow us on Twitter at Homer_bound for new episodes, or just watch our podcast page wherever you're listening to us now. I'd like to thank Wriste for inviting me along on this adventure, which has been such great fun. I'd also like to thank the composer and performer of all the music you've heard throughout the episode, who happens to be my dad. Thanks, Dad. You are the absolute best. I'd also like to thank Bubbo for her contributions to the audio, Webs2D for original art of my llama character, Total Love for additional art and graphic design, and Ghosty for graphic design as well. I'd like to thank our many guests for their time and expertise, and finally, an especially big thank you to Dr. Daniel, who closes out each show with additional insights on our discussions. We hope you'll consider reading along with us. We are using the Robert Fagles translation of the Iliad, and while we try to keep things intelligible for those who are new to the story, you might get more out of our discussions if you've read ahead, so feel free to pause and return later once you've read up. We would also like to remind you to stay tuned after Wriste and I have finished, since Dr. Daniel will have some awesome words of wisdom to add to our discussion. All right. Thanks for hanging out through our break. I will give it back to me and Wriste for the second half of this episode of Homeward Bound.
And as promised, we are back. I have neither refilled my water nor stretched my legs. Llama, I hope you haven't done the same.
I stretched my legs and refilled my water like a normal person.
Oh, you didn't get any beverage?
I still have a little bit of tea left next to me. It's cold. I don't care. I don't mind that at all. I've never been someone who particularly was mad about that.
What kind of tea are we working on today?
Honey chamomile.
Is that what you usually is that your go-to?
Well, I drink herbal tea at night because I don't want caffeine.
That's fair. Guess one thing that don't think we talked about before the break. Both of these books are really short.
They are very short.
They're little baby books. Book 19 is barely over 500 lines. And for comparison, book 16 is, I think, over 1,000 or close to 1,000.
And to put this into terms of like pages for you all, like both of these books together are 40 pages just about. They are very small books. And this is, like a, 600 or so page, I think, or maybe the upper 500 pages of this book, not counting the intro and appendices, is all story. 40 pages is like 10%. If that, so like this is a small couple of books. I think we might have a little bit more to talk about in terms of book 20, just because I find the Olympian gods in arms like it's such an interesting look at the gods. So like we get these glimpses.
We should just jump right in there.
Yeah, I think we should.
What's up?
Just the Olympian gods in arms. The picture of the gods that you get in this book, and there's one passage in particular that I just wrote like holy shit next to, because it was such a good passage about like.
Which one is this?
It's from line like 65 to about line 80, and it's. So the gods are rousing the opposing armies. So this book is called Olympian Gods in Arms. Zeus, finally just gives them permission to go all out with each army that they want to go with.
Yes.
Pick your sides, duke it out, have fun, go team.
I'll be watching. Zeus likes to watch.
Which, there's a line he sneaks in there, like, these mortals do concern me, dying as they are. And I was just like, that's hilarious. You just don't care at all. But so this portion from line, like, 65 to 80-ish is just a description of the all-out clash of these gods. And it is just incredible. And so this uproar that, like Poseidon and all of these gods but Poseidon like shakes the earth and Zeus is like thundering from over top.
Yeah.
And it shakes things up so hard that Hades is like, yo, are you guys gonna like break the underworld?
Yeah, and terror struck in the underworld. Hades, Lord of the Dead, cringed and sprang from his throne and screamed shrill. Fearing the god who rocks the ground above his realm, giant Poseidon would burst the earth wide open now, and lay bare to mortal men and immortal gods at last, the houses of the dead. Which is, I agree, a very
like
striking image.
And I think this to me signifies like you really seeing the gods in their full power, and just like how much absolute destruction is taking place. And how much weird and crazy interference takes place in this book now that the gods aren't like restrained.
the weird thing is they kind of tease us with it. Like they give us this earth-shaking, lightning-cracking imagery, but I believe it's Poseidon and Hera who are like who sort of kick it off with, I don't really care to fight. I'll just watch. But if those other gods get involved, they'll have a fight on their hands. But like, yeah, I'm just gonna chill. I'm just gonna watch.
I feel like that's because they've been the ones who have been doing all of the work up until this point, like behind the scenes. So they're just like, okay, we've like finally sown enough of the discord for it to like reach Zeus's ends, and now we get to sit back and watch while everyone goes into the fray.
Yeah, although I mean, I also don't think that
they still
God
get in
ever
there, though.
Clashes against God. There's just their presence.
It literally says, so God went up against God. I know this might not be referring to like a literal fight between the two, but like
it does. I feel like it's sort of pairing them, and then it also sort of subversive, like there, look, rearing against the Lord Poseidon, Phoebus Apollo loomed, but we also know that Poseidon's like, whatever, So it's kind of, I feel like this passage is sort of giving us a overview of the powers that be and how evenly or unevenly spread they are.
Interesting. I'm not sure I know what you mean by that.
Well, I don't know. I guess the real thing. Actually, no, wait. I think Athena does fight Ares. I think Athena does wound Ares or send him back or something like that. I remember Ares getting his ass kicked again. But in the next book,
all talk, no walk.
Well, I guess it sort of sets
Except
it up.
He really isn't all talk. We've established he really doesn't talk
he doesn't talk
at
very
all.
Much. There's one line saying, rearing against Hera, Artemis with arrow of gold, and cry that halloos the hunt.
Where is this?
This is off the same passage that you're pointing out. Line 80, line 80 plus, and they do go up against each other in book 21, but it's just like Hera literally takes Artemis's stuff and whacks her with it, and that sends her back home. So
I think for what it's worth, like, you are right in that there's a lot of build up to this and then like not much real fighting between the gods. But it's not really that they've been let loose on each other, it's that they've
let loose on the battlefield.
Like, it's like a chess game almost, except they're playing with real life pawns. I've said this before, I think.
You have.
Like, this is just when Zeus is like, okay, fine, you can all fucking play chess. Stop complaining to me about it. And he finally lets them actually play the game of chess with these pawns,
Well, do you remember the reason he gives for unleashing the gods, or one of the reasons why that he gives for unleashing the gods?
What have I told you about making me remember things?
I'm not making you. I mean, that is a rhetorical question, which I, of course, will answer.
Okay.
So he says, if Achilles fights the Trojans unopposed by us, not for a moment will they hold his breakneck force. Even before now, they'd shake to see him coming. Now, with his rage inflamed for his friend's death, I fear he'll raise the walls against the wills of fate. And this, I've said it before, and I'm repeating it here. This is also one of the interesting sort of, again, like the raw sort of physicality, like the realness of the gods, and the real, like when we think of fate, we think of something that's sort of invisibly flowing or whatever. And maybe it is, but
not here.
Zeus is like, I mean, when I say maybe it is, maybe that is the case in like the Iliad too. I don't know exactly, but Zeus is like, yeah, if we don't hold Achilles back, he'll just wax Troy, and that's not supposed to happen. So you guys need to go down there and stop him. That's one of the reasons. I think that's the main reason he gives. I can't remember if he gives any other reason. But yeah, that's a pretty hype reason to have gods to slow down Achilles, that he doesn't just defy all fate. The idea that fate can even be defied in that sort of way.
It's interesting, like, how, I don't know, Zeus, like, staggers out his goals. And he's just like, okay, this must happen, and a certain amount of people must die. And then this must also happen. And then after that, another amount of people must die. And can't have all these things happening back to back. It ruins the excitement of it all. Like, it's seriously, I do kind of get that vibe from him sometimes, though. Like, he must be awfully bored. He's been there forever. He's doing this pretty much for his own entertainment to begin with. Like,
so entertainment, and again, it seems like he's doing a fair bit of stuff out of obligation. You know, he's made his promises. He has to give Achilles his glory, and he has to give the Achaeans Troy.
Yeah, but he just goes around giving these promises out, like, I would assume kind of primarily for his own amusement, because it,
Maybe. I don't know why he promised Agamemnon the streets of Troy.
Well, my headcanon is he's just like, yeah, that sounds good enough. Sure. It sounds like it'll be interesting to watch. So sure, go do it. Have some money. Here.
I guess so.
Get yourself a snack.
I mean, we also have to remember that Zeus favors Troy. He prefers Troy. So it seems weird to me that he would just kind of willy-nilly give it away. What happened? I don't know. Maybe the fact that Paris sort of violated that hospitality rule, because if I remember correctly, that's kind of what Zeus is all about, right?
I would imagine very much so.
So perhaps that's why he
basically
was like,
kind of like the rules I've created for you mortals. Like, don't be a dick to strangers. Be hospitable to people. Don't steal your friend's bride prize and then start a 10-year war over it. Just the simple things.
Yeah. So again, as I said, we are unaware of the background of this particular promise. That is extra textual.
I get a little bit creative with my imageries of like how did we get here? I think that is one of the questions that's laced throughout this story so much that I'm always just like, what if I come up with really creative reasons for how we got into this crazy place? And I think part of that is because of the like kind of fantastical nature, but it's like an interestingly restrained fantastical nature of the gods in the Iliad.
I mean, restrained. Like we don't get as much of them as you'd like?
A little bit of that, but also like it at times feels like it holds back on what they can actually do.
Yeah, no,
like,
Yeah. Like they're not. I mean, do they ever really exert themselves at their full power? Like it seems like it always seems like in order to do whatever.
Okay. That's why I talked about that passage that I highlighted before with Poseidon.
Right.
Like that's one of the, and that's why I really like this book actually, because like it's one of the few times where you get to see the gods like truly showcase
their awesome power.
The awesome nature of their power, not in the like awesome bro way, but in the like literal awe-inducing.
Yeah. The awe and awesome.
Exactly. I think it's a great showcase of that, and it's one of the parts of the story that I really happen to like. That was always my interest in like Greek mythology, is like the cool thundery shit.
I mean, I guess we've gotten little bits and pieces of that lying around, like Zeus throwing his thunderbolts in Book 8, Athena helping Diomedes to stab Ares. I guess I'd actually say like the biggest god on god scene is probably in Book 21 when Achilles fights the river.
I can't wait. I can't wait to talk about that chapter.
I'm ready to talk about that one.
But we're not there yet. No, but I think this book is also important as kind of build up to this, because
this book is all build up, or mostly build up.
I think so. It's kind of like the shaking up a fizzy drink.
It's the amuse-bouche of Achilles.
It's the shaking up of a fizzy drink before you open it and spray it all over everyone.
Well, I actually like that we've talked about how we're sort of setting a scene. We're sort of juxtaposing God against God, because we go from, if we're to take this image or this imagery of God against God and we zoom in to our human to human, our mortal to mortal encounter between Aeneas and Achilles. Aeneas has been sort of goaded on by Apollo to face Achilles, and sort of out in no man's land, whatever that's supposed to mean. Aeneas and Achilles are like, you've seen JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, right?
Yes.
You know, like those strong, burly guys like walking up to each other. Like you guys can't see it, of course, but I'm like shifting my shoulders dramatically. I imagine that
Sure.
every time. Like it's basically what's happening, right?
Pretty much. I love that. That's a great mental image.
Where is it? There is the scene where they flash. Yeah, Aeneas came up first with long, menacing strides, head tossing his heavy helmet, his charging shield thrust out to defend his chest. But against him came Achilles, rearing like some lion. You can see them sort of just like, sort of dude broing it out, even if like that's not what's happening.
Yeah, one of my favorite things about this book, and something I wrote several times in my like margin notes that I make, was like, do they not realize this is a rampage?
It's funny because it's funny that you mentioned that, because this exchange between Aeneas and Achilles has a lot of talking.
Oh yeah, it's mouthy. Like they get straight up mouthy with each other.
Yes. And it's funny because in book 19, Achilles was just raring to go. You know, I want to kill people. I want to kill Trojans, and now he's here with Aeneas and
monologuing.
Yeah, Achilles gives his little like, you suck, I'm super cool and all that. I chased you down once, and thanks to the gods you got away, but I stole all your stuff. And then Aeneas just gives him his entire lineage, and it's lengthy.
Every now and then this happens. Like somebody does this. It's one of like Nestor's like, this reminds me of one time when, and then 3 pages later you're just like, okay, all right. So we're doing this. This is what we're doing, okay. And this is one of those where you're just like, okay. Thank you for that information.
It's creative time. If you watch anime or cartoons where people fight, I think I've mentioned this before, but this feels like that, you know, where when they're about to, you sort of have to suspend your disbelief and just be like, okay, these guys have to spar with words first, even if they're supposed to fight.
Sure.
It's just better for the story that they talk.
I think I laugh more when Nestor does it, just it's very on brand for him.
It's because you see it coming. You're like,
oh yeah,
okay, Nestor, here it comes. But going back to the gods versus gods, we have a mini version of that here, and that's kind of, we're making fun of the exchange and how long it is, but these two are comparing their lineage. They're comparing their godhood as well. So, you know, we have the gods facing each other, and then we have sort of these two godlike men, if you will, squaring off, and we get a real piece of Aeneas. He's strong, and he even says like, my mother's Aphrodite, yours is just some sea lady.
I'm pretty sure he actually like almost quite literally says that.
Your mom likes fish. My mom is Aphrodite. And so yeah,
I do love fish though.
Well, I don't think he means like in that kind of way.
I would not get along very well with Aeneas if that is his opinion on fish.
I'm sure he likes eating fish. I don't think that would be the kind of liking fish that he's talking about.
Let's see.
That is like probably like pats them on the head or whatever and like makes friends with them.
Some people like fish.
Yeah, those people are weird. Don't be a fish person.
I've taken us terribly off track. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I'll take the blame. But yeah, there's so if we're to take their sort of sparring for, and also Aeneas goes last. There's an exchange where Achilles goes first and Aeneas goes second, and his part is very long. And while I'm not totally sure what the significance of his lineage is, aside from that he, I guess, is like the last of the Dardans or Dardanian lineage or something, which I guess is important. Um, also feels like he's trying to hype himself up and give himself the courage to actually fight Achilles.
Yeah, he even takes like a really long, deep breath before he replies.
Yeah, it says that he takes a super deep breath, a long deep breath before he begins, and then he sort of rap gods it out.
Yeah, and then he just, after that, throws a spear directly at Achilles.
And this is the spear that I mentioned in the last section that's damages Achilles' spear, Achilles' shield. Doesn't punch through, but so I was like, oh no, come on, don't. How are you going to fix that? You can't fix that. You can't just like touch it up or hammer it back in. It'll ruin the whole image.
Nah, Hephaestus can whip that right back into shape.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I guess. What do you make of this? Aeneas is trying to win the battle before it starts, right? He's saying, my lineage is better than yours. We know that Thetis is not an Olympian. She's like the lowest of the gods. She's God, but she's the lowest.
Right. I honestly didn't make a huge amount out of that passage. It seemed just like bravado to me. And, again, kind of like you said, just pumping yourself up for something might be a little idiotic. But I think there's also probably part of him that genuinely believes in that. Yeah, I don't know.
A big deal, I guess, has been made of Achilles, like, your mother is a god. And that's been sort of there to explain his power. But Aeneas's mother is also a god. Why doesn't he have this same kind of power in his mind? Or as he's talking, I can hear him weighing like, okay, he's got his mother's Thetis, but mine is this Olympian's. I should win by birth, or this factor.
Okay, here's what I'm thinking. Because we've talked about this in kind of, I forget who else it was, but like the show within a show. Sarpedon, I think, was the other person.
Sure, yeah.
So like, I think this is another one of those in a little bit of a way. Like, it's almost like this is not your story, man. Like, you have one, obviously, because Aphrodite's your mom. It's cool, she got you a little show. But like, this isn't your part of the story to be focused on. I think it's just a little bit of that.
Well, it could be that what Aeneas is basically doing is he's setting the stage for, I don't know, it's almost it's like got a hint of nihilism about it. He says, as for strength in war, Zeus lends power to some, others he wastes away, whatever his pleasure, the strongest god of all. Which is, it's kind of like a arms thrown in the air and saying, fuck it. Who knows who will win? Whoever the gods love the most. We're on even footing in terms of birth, so it just matters here and now who has the strongest god behind them. And perhaps he thinks Apollo's behind him, perhaps he thinks his mother is behind him. This is not the case. But also,
no, it is not.
But also, like, they're like, aside from Achilles' immortal birth, or his immortal mother, like, he's also just strong, right? Like, he and Aeneas are clearly not equals, even if Aeneas' mother is better than Achilles.
Right. I mean, your parent can be a better god without necessarily making you a better child of a god. Well,
does it make you a better warrior? And the answer is no.
Clearly, Thetis was feeding Achilles like muscle milk or something, because that kid is huge.
Strong. Also, something we also forgot to talk about in book 18, but I'll point out real quick. There is a line that describes Achilles as handsome.
Oh.
So it's very early in the book.
Plot thickens.
If you want to thumb through it. That is the only time that I've noticed that Achilles is described. So,
although I will note that, like, in works that are as old as these, sometimes the word handsome is descriptive, like, of an overall more just positive quality, and not, like, I mean, it's obviously in regards to his appearance, but like a
in regards to his face.
handsome reward. Oh, it is in regards directly to his face.
When he is like pouring dirt over himself
well,
and clawing his handsome face.
Okay, there goes ugly Achilles then.
I still hold out for ugly Achilles.
Okay.
I think that ugly Achilles does not have to be not handsome.
We can dream.
He just has to be ugly. Someone can do it. Someone can capture this image.
Ugly. Yeah, I mean, like, I think people like that throughout the tales of time have existed that are both ugly and handsome. That's very possible.
Villains get it all the time. Sort of ugly handsomeness, or a corrupted beauty, if you will. Anyway, we can slip past that. This book also has mentioned a couple times before, but Aeneas lifts a boulder, and we get, my favorite, no two men could hoist it, weak as men are now. I love that line, weak as men are now. It's so loaded. And Aeneas just lifts up a rock and hucks it at Achilles. And of course, Aeneas will die if he actually comes face to face with Achilles.
Just about anyone will die if they come face to face with Achilles. Yes. Especially right now because it's a rampage.
This is another part where fate is sort of given a physical tether that it has to be brought about by the work of someone's hands. Where Poseidon and I think it's Poseidon.
I believe it is. Who just like
Poseidon
yeets him
and Hera.
Out. Like no.
Yeah, Poseidon and Hera discuss it, and I think, he is destined to survive. Talking about Aeneas. Yeah, so the generation of Dardanus will not perish. Yeah, and slightly back, this is around line 350. So come, let us rescue Aeneas from death ourselves, for fear the son of Cronus might just tower in rage. If Achilles kills this man, he is destined to survive.
He's marked off on the do not kill list.
He's marked off on the will not die list, but the gods still have to bring it about. It doesn't just happen. The gods have to fling him out of Achilles' reach.
This is an especially fun one of those. He like mists over Achilles' eyes. It's like fireman carries Aeneas off of the battlefield, and then
it says he slings him, and he is hurled, and he is flying, and then he lands.
Just like, bye.
There isn't really anything more to say about that. He's just like flying,
and then he lifts the mist from Achilles' eyes, and Achilles is just like, where
is he?
Where did he go? There was a guy I was about to kill right in front of me. Where is he?
And we get some more of the gods' direct influence. Hector and we're teased with Hector meeting Achilles. This is one of those. I don't know why the Iliad likes, and this thing happened 3 times. I don't know if the number 3 has.
I know that. Well, I mean, this is far. I don't know. The number 3, I think, has always had a lot of historical significance, going back a really, really long amount of time. I know, like, much more recently, it's a huge thing within religions, especially the Abrahamic religions, because of trinities and whatnot.
Trinity.
But it originated way before that. I would love to say that I knew more about that.
Yeah.
But I just know it's something that has popped up in like almost every historical thing that I've ever read.
Well, yeah,
things happens in 3s. 3 feels like just a number everyone is comfortable with. Like, if you repeat something 3 times, that's the perfect amount of times. Don't ask us why. That's just the amount of times that you repeat something.
Yeah, that may be all there is to it. Like my mind goes to when Diomedes charged Apollo. It says he charged him 3 times, and on the 4th time, Apollo's like, "Dude, what are you doing? Stop!"
Yeah.
Achilles will chase Hector around Troy 3 times, and And in this particular book, Achilles will try to beat down Hector, and Apollo will whisk him away 3 times, and then on the fourth he'll bring him out of reach. And Achilles is just like, oh, whatever. I'll get you later, but until then, I'm going to kill more Trojans. That's what he does.
Okay, I have asked you thrice to die, and you have thus far denied me. We'll get there. We'll get there. I will kill you.
Yeah, and I guess the rest that there is to this book is Achilles gets a few kills, sort of scattered throughout the last half of the book, and then we get a little concentration of it toward the end. And we know what kind of a warrior Achilles is.
So there are one or two things here at the end that caught my eye. The first one is Tros, Alastor's son, who supplicates or attempts to supplicate to Achilles, and beg him for mercy. And once again, it's a rampage. He did not realize this, but it's a rampage.
Well, it's funny you point that out, because so this is something that only the Trojans do. The Achaeans do not do this to the Trojans. And and this is extra textual general knowledge, but they've been at this for a while. The Achaeans can't reach the Trojan walls, and so they mostly do raids. They raid nearby, I don't know, towns, farms, whatever. And what you can do is you can say, hey, you've captured me out here outside of the city of Troy, but inside the city of Troy, my family has much wealth. So if you just take me, and my family will give you ransom, and I'll go back home. And that was how it would go. And that's why you see the Trojans doing this.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It kind of shows the cultural differences between the two camps of people. The Trojans are all prepared to do this, and the Achaeans just never do that. They take it as more of a fact that you're just gonna die in battle if you come up against your enemy. You don't show them mercy.
That's an interesting read. I don't know exactly how to read this difference. I guess the Achaeans have always felt like the aggressors, and so it would be weird for an Achaean to supplicate themselves.
Well, it's interesting because the way I think about it, or when I think about it, the Achaeans are a sailing people, and the Trojans live in a walled city. So they just have different cultures. Obviously they do. They're two different places. And I think that leads to differing states of, expectations when it comes to things like meeting in battle and the other people's rituals. But obviously there are things that they share in common completely. For instance, Priam appealing to Achilles to give his son back so he can do the burial rites. Some things are always held in common, it seems, but other things are not. And the Trojans are far more likely to try and ransom off their life somehow, whereas the Achaeans, from what I've been thinking, just poring over my head within the last few seconds talking about this, can't really think of an example of the Achaeans ever really doing that. As you said. So I just think it shows somewhat of a difference in values to some extent.
It's interesting that you point that out. I can't take credit for drawing this conclusion. Maybe I read this in the intro by Bernard Knox. Maybe I read it somewhere else.
The intro is fantastic.
But I can't credit it directly, but I'll remember it as best I can. The idea that the Trojans are, I guess, expecting or hoping for this kind of treatment is, as you said, it's a difference in cultures. The Trojans are not warlike. They are, they're civilized, I guess, if you want to put it that way. But the Achaeans are warlike. They they are ready to just show up and fight and to die. And this is sort of reflected like how when Priam says, I can't stand to watch my son die.
Yeah.
That's an example of how that's just a practical way it plays out, I guess. Priam is he's not a warlike king. And perhaps this can serve to explain how perhaps little his involvement is in the war, or even some of the calls that he does make, where he's I don't know, where he makes some weird decisions. Yeah, that was the reading that I was given on this particular thing, and I guess for it happening here, it's just emphasizing that mercilessness that Achilles is going for. And we can also, I guess, look back on book 6 when Menelaus is stopped from having pity on a Trojan soldier by Agamemnon. Like, hey, we're not doing this anymore. This is it.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's kind of an ingrained value that, like, it's not as satisfying when something is given to you. The taking of it is part of the act. It is part of the motivation for the act, is like to almost be able to lord it over someone.
Or better yet, they're here for it. They're here for the whole thing. Why would you trade something for a piece of it when you're going to, they sailed there with God, as Diomedes said. They're there to get all of it. Why bother?
Yeah, exactly.
With ransoms.
Like, exactly. I mean, like, that's super true as well, though. Why bother with the ransom when you can just take all of it?
Yeah, and I guess that's what they intend. And that's how book 20 ends, with a sort of merciless rampage. Achilles is given much attention to detail and how powerful he is and how devastating his strength is.
Okay, I feel like that's not truly doing it justice.
Okay.
I'm gonna read out, like...
Read us out.
Okay. This is a little longer than I would normally read, but I really love these, like, this very long paragraph so much. Achilles, now like inhuman fire raging on through the mountain gorges, splinter dry, setting ablaze big stands of timber, the wind swirling the huge fireball left and right. Chaos of fire. Achilles storming on with brandished spear like a frenzied god of battle, trampling all he killed, and the earth ran black with blood. Thundering on like oxen broad in the snow, some field-hand yokes to crush white barley, heaped on a well-laid threshing floor, and the grain is husked out fast by the bellowing oxen's hoofs. So as the great Achilles rampaged on, his sharp-hoofed stallions trampled shields and corpses, axle under his chariot splashed with blood, blood on the handrails sweeping round the car, sprays of blood shooting up from the stallion's hoofs, and churning whirling rims, and the son of Peleus charioteering on to seize his glory, bloody filth splattering both strong arms, Achilles' invincible arms. Like, that is...
It's a closing paragraph.
Ridiculous. It's such an intense image of just blood-covered Achilles, like, on this absolute bender rampage after Patroclus dies, just covered with blood.
And I like how descriptive the grain being husked. Like, I'm a 21st century guy, I don't know what that means exactly, but as it's described, I'm able to understand what's happening. I have a clear image of what this husking of grain underneath stomping hooves looks like. And when we bring us back to the real world with Achilles and his team stomping over all of the dead, it works. It works.
Yeah.
I haven't pointed this out for a lot of the metaphors, but even like there was one really good one with maybe it was last episode, maybe it was the one before that, where people were stretching oxhide or something tight.
Oh yeah.
to like squeeze the oils out. Like I don't know what that process is or looks like,
Well,
but the description brought me there.
I think for the threshing floor, that's just like the grain is there to soak up the blood.
What do you mean? The grain is there to soak up the blood?
Well, isn't a threshing floor like a slaughter floor? Or am I getting that wrong?
So you can thresh grain, if I understand correctly. It's referring to grain. The husking involves like taking out the outer layers of the grain.
I'm seeing the image now.
Yeah, you're thinking of like a slaughterhouse or something like that.
Yeah, I was thinking blood. Because blood is literally every other freaking word in this entire paragraph.
That's understandable. The poet definitely lost some opportunity of using a red fruit or some other red object.
Like the scene in Lord of the Rings where Denethor is eating the tomatoes that everyone always complains about. God. I love how much people complain about that.
Do people actually complain about that?
Oh yeah, people hate it. The tomato juices look gross.
Well, it's supposed to look gross.
I know, that's the point. I agree with you completely.
I mean, it's heavy-handed imagery, but the imagery is there and it works.
It's fantastic. It works.
He's an all-consuming,
it works brilliantly.
Disgusting king. Well, anyways,
there was definitely an opportunity for that here.
Yeah, no, you're right. They should have asked Tolkien or Peter Jackson for an image. Anyway, I think that pretty handily closes off our discussion on book 20, as well on book 19.
Short books.
Yeah, I think we got more out of it than I expected. We didn't talk about this on air, but beforehand I said, this might be a shorter episode, but I'm glad that we're able to like zoom in on these smaller things and just discuss them.
Yeah, I was actually, I don't know. I think though these books are short, there's actually like a decent amount to go into. I think one of the things I like about them is that like for how short they are, they're actually relatively impactful.
Yeah.
And like they're just so short. But there's a lot going on actually. I'm glad we were able to get into a good amount of it.
Yeah. And don't go away just yet. You're not done getting into it. Dr. Daniel will leave his tag at the end of this episode. In fact, in just a few seconds. So stick around, and we'll pass it off to him.
Hello everybody, my name is Daniel, otherwise known as Dr. Daniel, Dr. Dan, or the Dancing Grad, and I'm here to offer some thoughts on Wriste and Llama's conversation about Iliad books 19 and 20. First off, towards the beginning of the conversation, Wriste and Llama talked about the culpability, the blameability of Achilles in everything that has come to pass. This takes us back to Book 1, wherein Achilles basically prays for the Greeks to be slaughtered in return for his honor being slighted by Agamemnon. As has been discussed in previous episodes, it's not until the tragedy strikes close to home, with the death of Patroclus, that Achilles relents on that initial prayer that the Greeks get slaughtered in the war, and he rejoins the effort. He's not doing so out of any innate love for the Greeks, however. He's doing so because he now has a really selfish and really intense personal reason for rejoining the war, to get vengeance for Patroclus and to kill Hector. Now, I'm far from an Achilles apologist. In fact, I very much align with Llama and Wriste in pointing out Achilles' flaws and the ways that he makes bad decisions that lead to lots and lots of death and negative things. But one piece of context to keep in mind is the culture in which this poem is being set, a very individualistic culture that prioritizes individual people and their decisions rather than a collective or a community. At the time, there was no concept of a unified entity like the modern-day country of Greece. Yes, people like Agamemnon and Menelaus and Odysseus and Achilles were all flying under the same banner, but it wouldn't be correct to say that they were flying under the same flag storming the beaches. Each Greek chieftain and each Greek contingent that served under them were there fighting for the same cause, but they weren't necessarily united politically. They wouldn't consider themselves the community of the country of Greece because such an entity did not exist. So, when Achilles prays in Book 1 that the Greeks die in return for the slight that he has himself experienced at Agamemnon's hands, and when he rejoins the war in Book 19 for very selfish reasons that he states quite clearly, it's very much in line with the ideal of the Homeric individual above all else. I get mine, and then I get out of there. Another point in Book 19 that was discussed was the very moving speech of Briseis about Patroclus. She strongly emphasizes how kind Patroclus was to her after her hometown of Lyrnessus was razed and her family killed by Achilles. I like to think of this speech of Briseis as bringing the character of Patroclus full circle from when we first met him in the Iliad up until now. In one of his first major scenes, I think it's at the end of Book 11, we see Patroclus as a healer, somebody who's very empathetic and can look outside of himself to care for other people. Then we see a different side of Patroclus in Book 16 after he successfully chased the Trojans away from the Greek ships. We see a Patroclus who is not very kind, someone who is angling for the kind of glory that Homeric warriors go for, even going so far as to boast, very cruelly, over the death of Hector's charioteer. So Briseis' emphasis on Patroclus' kindness, I think, brings us back full circle to that first image that we got of Patroclus, of the healer, of the kind person, of the empath who's able to see outside of himself and care for other people. The voice of Briseis as well is one of the few times that we actually hear a mortal woman speak within the Iliad. I think it was Wriste who pointed out that her speech makes it sound like she's basically mourning her future, a future without somebody as kind as Patroclus to look after her. And I think that's absolutely right, and aligns Briseis with a lot of other women in the Iliad. Think, for example, of Andromache, the wife of Hector in Book 6, who laments what her future and what Astyanax's future will look like without Hector to protect them. The voices and perspectives of characters like Patroclus and Briseis have been fruitful material for modern novelists who are trying to adapt and tell a new story with ancient material. We've already alluded a few times to the novel The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller that tells the story of the Iliad from the perspective of Patroclus. Another novel to look into, if you're interested in this idea of telling the story of the Iliad from other perspectives, is the novel Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker, which tells the story of the Iliad from the perspective of Briseis. There was also a question that was very definitely not aimed towards me, wink wink nudge nudge, about whether the state of one's body, unburied after death, would be analogous to the state of a soul. And this was in response to Patroclus' body being imbued with nectar and ambrosia by Thetis to prevent the wounds from festering or to prevent any other damage coming to Patroclus' corpse. Unfortunately, I don't actually know the answer to this question, particularly within the context of the Iliad at this point of the story, because the two corpses that are mainly at issue for the back half of the poem, namely the corpse of Patroclus and the corpse of Hector, are both protected by the gods. They're both imbued with substances that prevent decomposition and physical mistreatment by external forces. Stay tuned for Book 23, however, when we see the ghost of Patroclus come to Achilles in a dream. This is at page 561 of the Fagles translation, wherein the narrator tells us that Patroclus drifted up into Achilles' dream, and Patroclus, quote, was like the man to the life, every feature, the same tall build, and the fine eyes and voice, and the very robes that used to clothe his body. End quote. So that makes it seem as though there's a bit of a difference between the state of the body in death and the state of the soul. Book 19 ends with one of the most "where on earth did that come from" moments of the Iliad. Achilles is upbraiding his horses, the same horses that Patroclus was riding into battle, for allowing Patroclus to die. And then all of a sudden, imbued with a voice by the goddess Hera, one of the horses talks back to Achilles and says, "It wasn't because of us, it was because of the god Apollo, and by the way, you're fated to die as well." I really don't have much more to add to this beyond a fun fact about the horses' names. Fagles calls them Roan Beauty and Charger, and a Roan Beauty, apparently a roan is a type of coat for a horse or an animal that is primarily one color but dappled with a few strands of other colors. The names in Greek for these horses are actually Xanthos and Balios. Xanthos is actually an adjective that I've talked about before, often used to describe the color of people's hair, like Menelaus' hair and Achilles' hair. It's often translated as blonde, but can also take on shades of brown or red or other related colors. The other horse is called Balios, and this adjective seems to mean something like dappled or spotted. So the names of the horses, Xanthos and Balios, are basically appearance terms. The color of the horse, Xanthos, and Balios in terms of the coloring of the horse's coat. Finally, a quick note about the number 3, which appears in the context of Book 20, when Achilles is trying to charge Aeneas 3 times, but Aeneas has already been yoked away from the battlefield by Poseidon. Llama pointed out that the number 3 is important to a lot of religions, including religions that subscribe to an idea like a trinity, but this absolutely does seem to have been the case for Greco-Roman religion as well. But from a more pragmatic standpoint, within the context of the Iliad and the narrative that's unfolding, this pattern of 3 attempts and then a 4th attempt that gets stopped by a larger deity is enforced throughout the entire poem. Wriste pointed out that this idea appeared in Book 5 when Diomedes tried to attack the god Apollo, and then Apollo, on Diomedes' 4th attempt, basically said, "What are you trying to do?" Another interesting comparandum for this pattern of 3 attempts and then a 4th that gets stopped by an external force actually happens to Patroclus in Book 16, when he tries 3 times to climb the walls of Troy, and Apollos bonks him down 3 times from the walls, and on the 4th try says, "What are you trying to do? You are not fated to take the city of Troy." So what ties together Diomedes, Patroclus, and Achilles in all of these contexts? It seems that all 3 of them were trying to do something that is not ordained, something that is not supposed to happen. Diomedes is not supposed to wound a god other than Aphrodite. Patroclus is not fated to take the city of Troy. And Achilles is not fated to kill Aeneas, because Aeneas needs to live past Achilles. So the thematic resonance of this pattern of the number 3, I think, is the easiest explanation for this. Why 3 times? Because we're drawing connections across all these different characters and contexts. In any case, that's about all I have to say, so thank you for listening, and with that, I'll toss it back to Wriste and Llama.
Thank you so much, Dr. Daniel, and thank you once again, dear listener, for tuning in. We hope you've enjoyed our discussion as well as Dr. Daniel's wonderfully informative expert opinions. We also hope you'll take the opportunity to continue reading along with us, since there is still plenty to love about these stories. Keep an eye out for future episodes by following us on Twitter at Homer_bound, or wherever you happen to be listening to us right now. We're looking forward to seeing you for the next episode, but until next time, take care and thank you for joining us for this episode of Homer Bound.